Jake Harrison wiped his hands on a rag that had seen better days. The clock on the wall of Riverside Auto Repair showed 6:58 p.m. 2 more minutes and his 12-hour shift would be over. His back ached from leaning over engines all day, and his stomach growled with hunger. The thought of a hot shower and leftover pizza kept him going as he put away his tools. The small repair shop sat on the edge of town, right where County Road 16 met the highway. It wasn't much to look at. Concrete floors stained with oil, fluorescent lights that buzzed overhead, and the constant smell of grease and metal. But Jake had worked here for 5 years, and despite the long hours and modest pay, he took pride in fixing things that others couldn't. Frank Peterson, the shop owner, walked by counting the day's cash. "Lock up when you leave, Harrison," he said without looking up. "And don't forget we've got that delivery truck coming in first thing tomorrow. Mayor's office needs it back by noon." "Got it, boss," Jake replied, closing his toolbox. The sound came suddenly, the high-pitched wail of sirens growing louder. Jake looked up just as an ambulance sped past the shop, its red and blue lights flashing against the darkening sky. Then came a noise that Jake recognized instantly, the sound of an engine in serious trouble. The ambulance's siren cut off abruptly. Through the open garage door, Jake saw the vehicle pull over about 50 yards down the highway. White smoke billowed from under its hood. Without thinking, Jake grabbed his portable toolbox and ran. His work boots pounded against the asphalt as he approached the ambulance. A female paramedic had jumped out of the driver's seat and was already opening the hood, coughing as smoke engulfed her face. "Need some help?" Jake called out, jogging up beside her. The paramedic turned. Her name tag read, Olivia Martinez. Worry lines creased her forehead and sweat beaded along her hairline despite the cool evening air. "Engine just died," she said, her voice tight with stress. "We've got a critical cardiac patient inside who needs to get to Memorial Hospital immediately." Jake peered under the hood. His experienced eyes quickly spotted the problem. A burst radiator hose had sprayed coolant all over the engine compartment, and an electrical connection had shorted out. A second paramedic emerged from the back of the ambulance. "Dispatch says the nearest available unit is 20 minutes away," he reported grimly. Jake glanced through the open rear doors of the ambulance. Inside lay an elderly man connected to monitors that beeped steadily. The man's face was pale gray. His breathing labored. "I can fix this," Jake said, already reaching for his tools. "It's a blown radiator hose and some electrical damage. Give me 10 minutes. Olivia looked at him doubtfully. "Are you sure? This is county property. You could get in trouble. Better to ask forgiveness than permission when someone's life is on the line," Jake replied, rolling up his sleeves. He'd fixed worse problems in less time. As Jake began working, he heard heavy footsteps approaching from behind. "Harrison, what the hell do you think you're doing?" Jake didn't need to turn around to recognize Frank's voice. His boss had followed him from the shop. "Helping out," Jake answered, not pausing his work. "Their patient needs to get to the hospital." Frank grabbed Jake's shoulder. "That's county property. You're not authorized to work on emergency vehicles. You could cost me my business license." Jake carefully removed Frank's hand from his shoulder. "There's a man dying in there. Not our problem," Frank insisted, lowering his voice. "Get back to the shop now or you're fired." Jake looked at the ambulance, then at his boss, then at Olivia, whose eyes pleaded silently for help. In the back of the ambulance, a monitor began, beeping more rapidly. "His blood pressure's dropping," called the other paramedic. "We need to move now." Jake turned back to Frank. "Then I guess I'm fired." Frank's face flushed red. He opened his mouth to say something, thought better of it, and stomped back toward the shop. Jake returned to work with increased urgency. He used a piece of rubber hose from his toolkit to bypass the damaged radiator section. Then he cleaned the electrical connections and used electrical tape to secure the loose wiring. Working methodically but quickly, his hands moved with practiced precision. "Almost there," he told Olivia, who was holding a flashlight for him as darkness fell around them. "The alternator looks okay, but the battery connections got corroded. I'm cleaning them now." Cars slowed as they passed, drivers craning their necks to see what was happening. Jake ignored them, focused entirely on the task at hand. After exactly 9 minutes, Jake stepped back. "Try it now." Olivia jumped into the driver's seat and turned the key. The engine sputtered once, twice, then roared to life. The dashboard lights came on and the siren gave a test wail. "That should get you to Memorial," Jake explained, wiping sweat from his forehead. "It's not a permanent fix, but it'll hold." Relief washed over Olivia's face. "Thank you. Seriously, thank you." She scribbled something on a business card and handed it to him. "My number. Let me know where to send the thank you pizza tomorrow." Jake smiled. "Just doing my job. Get your patient to the hospital." Olivia nodded and closed her door. The ambulance pulled away, siren once again blaring as it accelerated down the highway toward Memorial Hospital, its red lights fading into the distance. Jake watched until it disappeared around a bend, feeling a mixture of satisfaction and dread. He turned back toward the shop where Frank stood waiting, arms crossed. As Jake approached, Frank held out his hand. "Shop keys. Now." Jake pulled the keys from his pocket and dropped them into Frank's palm. "I'd make the same choice again. Your tools will be packed up by morning. Come get them before noon or they go in the dumpster." Frank's voice was cold. Jake nodded and walked toward his old pickup truck in the parking lot. As the reality of unemployment hit him, he tried to focus on the positive. At least he'd helped save someone's life today. That had to be worth something. What he didn't know as he drove home that night was that the patient in the ambulance wasn't just any heart attack victim. The man he had helped save without ever seeing his face was Richard Kingsley, founder and CEO of Kingsley Motors, the third largest electric car manufacturer in America. And Richard Kingsley never forgot a debt. Jake woke up the next morning on his worn couch, still in his work clothes. His back ached from the uneven cushions. Sunlight streamed through blinds that needed dusting. The small apartment felt emptier than usual, or maybe that was just the weight of unemployment pressing down on him. He checked his phone. 8:17 a.m. No missed calls, no job offers, just a text from his sister asking if he was coming to Sunday dinner this weekend. Jake hadn't told anyone about losing his job yet. The "thadridice" word seemed stuck in his throat. After a quick shower and a bowl of cereal, Jake drove back to Riverside Auto Repair. The shop was already busy. 2 cars waited in the service bays while Frank directed a new mechanic, someone Jake had never seen before, on how to use the diagnostic computer. Frank noticed Jake standing by the door and pointed to a cardboard box in the corner. "Your stuff. I was serious about the dumpster deadline." Jake picked up the box without a word. 5 years of working here and it all fit in one box. He'd expected to feel angry, but mostly he just felt tired. "For what it's worth," Frank said as Jake turned to leave. That was some quick thinking with the ambulance, but rules are rules, Harrison. Jake nodded and walked out to his truck. He placed the box carefully in the passenger seat and sat behind the wheel, wondering what to do next. His savings would cover rent and food for about a month if he was careful. After that, he didn't want to think about after that. His phone rang, startling him. Unknown number. "Hello? Is this Jake Harrison?" a woman's voice asked. "Speaking." "Good morning, Mr. Harrison. My name is Samantha Wright. I'm calling on behalf of Mr. Richard Kingsley." Jake frowned. The name sounded familiar, but he couldn't place it. "Mr. Kingsley would like to meet with you tomorrow at 2 p.m. if that's convenient," Samantha continued. "A car can pick you up." "I'm sorry, but who is Mr. Kingsley?" There was a pause on the other end. "Richard Kingsley is the CEO of Kingsley Motors. He was told you might be available given recent events." Jake's mind raced. Kingsley Motors was one of the largest electric car companies in the country. Their vehicles cost more than he made in a year. "Available for what exactly?" he asked. "Mr. Kingsley prefers to discuss that in person. Are you interested?" Jake looked at the box of tools beside him. "Yes, I'm interested." After providing his address and ending the call, Jake sat in his truck confused. Why would a car company CEO want to meet him? Maybe they needed mechanics. It seemed unlikely, but he had nothing to lose. Later that evening, Jake turned on the local news while heating up leftover pizza. A familiar face appeared on the screen. The female paramedic from yesterday, Olivia. She stood outside Memorial Hospital, microphones pointed at her. "We're very thankful for the quick-thinking mechanic who got our ambulance running again," she was saying. "Without his help, Mr. Kingsley might not have made it to the hospital in time." The camera cut to a news anchor. "That's right, Linda. Billionaire Richard Kingsley, founder of Kingsley Motors, suffered a severe cardiac event while visiting our city yesterday. Doctors say he's now in stable condition thanks to the rapid response of emergency services." Jake's pizza slice stopped halfway to his mouth. The patient in the ambulance had been Richard Kingsley, the same Kingsley who wanted to meet him tomorrow. His phone buzzed with a text message from an unknown number. "Just saw you on the news. Hope you don't mind I gave your name to Mr. Kingsley," when he asked. "You deserve recognition for what you did. Olivia, ambulance lady." Jake texted back, "They showed me on the news?" Olivia replied quickly, "Just mentioned local mechanic. Didn't use your name." But Mr. K was very interested in who fixed his ride. Jake spent the night tossing and turning. By morning, he had convinced himself the meeting would be nothing. Maybe a quick thank you and a handshake. Rich people did that sometimes, made gestures that cost them nothing. At precisely 1:30 p.m. the next day, a sleek black car pulled up outside Jake's apartment building. The driver, a woman in a dark suit, opened the rear door for him. "Mr. Harrison, I'm here to take you to Kingsley Motors." The drive took 40 minutes, leaving the familiar parts of town behind. They passed through areas Jake had never visited. Business districts with gleaming buildings and carefully landscaped grounds. Finally, they turned into a long driveway leading to a modern glass structure with Kingsley Motors displayed in simple letters above the entrance. Jake felt underdressed in his cleanest jeans and button-down shirt. The driver led him through an airy lobby where people in expensive suits walked purposefully. No one seemed to notice the nervous mechanic in their midst. An elevator whisked them to the top floor. When the doors opened, Jake saw a space that looked more like a luxury home than an office. Large windows showed views of the city in all directions. A woman rose from behind a desk. "Mr. Harrison, welcome. I'm Samantha Wright, Mr. Kingsley's assistant. We spoke on the phone." She led Jake through double doors into a spacious office. Behind a glass desk sat a man in his 60s with neatly combed gray hair and sharp blue eyes. Despite looking a bit pale, he stood as Jake entered. "Mr. Harrison," Richard Kingsley said, extending his hand. "I understand I owe you my life." Jake shook his hand, feeling awkward. "I just fixed an ambulance, sir. The paramedics did the real work. Please sit down." Kingsley gestured to a chair opposite his desk. "The paramedics tell a different story. They say without your quick repair, I wouldn't have made it to the hospital in time." Jake sat, noticing that despite his recent heart attack, Kingsley seemed full of energy. His eyes were alert and focused entirely on Jake. "I also understand you lost your job because you stopped to help," Kingsley continued. Jake shifted uncomfortably. "News travels fast. In my experience, bad news always does." Kingsley smiled slightly. "Would you do it again, knowing it would cost you your job?" Jake didn't hesitate. "Yes, sir. Anyone would have done the same." "No, Mr. Harrison. Not anyone." Kingsley leaned forward. "Most people would have called 911 and gone home. You chose differently." He pressed a button on his desk. "Samantha, bring in the file, please." Jake wondered what file could possibly exist about him. He was nobody important, just a mechanic, who happened to be in the right place at the right time. Kingsley studied Jake with interest. "Tell me, Mr. Harrison, what would you say if I offered you a job?" Jake stared at Richard Kingsley, unsure if he had heard correctly. "A job, sir?" "Yes, Mr. Harrison. A job." Kingsley's eyes never left Jake's face. "But before we discuss that, I'd like to know more about you." Samantha entered with a thin folder, which she placed on Kingsley's desk before leaving quietly. Kingsley opened it and glanced at the papers inside. Jacob Allen Harrison, 34 years old, graduate of Central Technical College with an associate degree in automotive technology, specialized training in hybrid and electric vehicle systems. Kingsley looked up. 15 years of experience, Last 5 at Riverside Auto Repair. Jake shifted in his chair. You've done your homework. When someone saves my life, I make it a point to learn who they are. Kingsley closed the folder. What? The paperwork doesn't tell me is why a man with your qualifications was working at a small-town garage for less than half what you could make elsewhere. The question caught Jake off guard. No one had ever asked him that before, not even himself, not really. I like the work, he said finally. Frank gave me freedom to solve problems my own way. The pay was enough. And my sister lives nearby with her kids. After our parents died, we tried to stay close. Kingsley nodded as if this answer satisfied him. Family is important. So is doing work that matters. He stood up and walked to the window. Do you know what we do here at Kingsley Motors, Mr. Harrison? You? Make electric cars. Good ones from what I hear. Too expensive for most people, though. Kingsley smiled slightly. Directness. I appreciate that. He turned back to Jake. We're working to change the too expensive part. But yes, we make electric vehicles. We also research new technologies, particularly in emergency power systems. He pressed a button and one wall of the office transformed into a screen showing various vehicles, not just cars but ambulances, fire trucks, and police cruisers. After my experience, I became curious about emergency vehicle failures. Do you know how often ambulances break down during transport? Jake shook his head. Too often, Kingsley continued. And when they do, people die. People like me who happen to be unlucky enough to need emergency services when a mechanical failure occurs. He returned to his desk and sat down. I'm starting a new division at Kingsley Motors. We're going to develop better systems for emergency vehicles, more reliable power sources, quick repair modules, backup systems that can be activated instantly. Jake leaned forward, interested despite himself. Like a secondary power system that kicks in automatically when the main engine fails. Exactly. Kingsley's eyes lit up. Someone who understands both traditional engines and electric systems. Someone practical who can think on their feet and solve real-world problems. Someone like you, Mr. Harrison. Jake blinked in surprise. Are you offering me a job as a mechanic? No. Kingsley slid a document across the desk. I'm offering you a position as director of the new Emergency Vehicle Technologies Division. Jake looked at the paper. The salary number made him dizzy, more than 10 times what he'd made at Riverside Auto Repair, plus benefits, stock options, and other words that seemed foreign to him. This is a mistake, Jake said, pushing the paper back. I'm just a mechanic. I don't have the education or experience to run a division. You have exactly the experience I need. Kingsley pushed the paper back toward Jake. You know how to fix problems when lives are on the line. You're not afraid to make decisions. And most importantly, you put people before rules when it matters. Jake rubbed his face with his hands. Mr. Kingsley, I appreciate the offer, but... Richard, Kingsley interrupted. My friends call me Richard. Richard, Jake continued awkwardly. I think you're making this offer because you feel you owe me something. You don't. Anyone would have done what I did. Would they? Richard leaned back in his chair. My driver was right there. He did nothing. Several cars passed by. No one stopped, even your boss, or what was his name? Frank. Even Frank chose his business over helping. Only you made a different choice. Richard stood up. Come with me. I want to show you something. They left the office and took the elevator down to the ground floor, then continued to a basement level. The doors opened to reveal a massive research facility. Engineers in white coats worked at various stations. Large screens showed vehicle designs and technical specifications. Richard led Jake to a circular area in the center where an ambulance sat on a platform. It wasn't just any ambulance. Jake recognized it immediately as the same one he had repaired. We bought it from the county, Richard explained. Our engineers have been examining it all morning. A woman in a lab coat approached them. Mr. Kingsley, good to see you up and about. Dr. Eleanor Wright, this is Jake Harrison, the mechanic who fixed this ambulance and saved my life. Dr. Wright shook Jake's hand enthusiastically. Impressive work, Mr. Harrison, especially given the time constraint and limited tools. Jake shrugged. Just a temporary fix. A temporary fix that worked perfectly, Dr. Wright countered. We've been trying to develop emergency backup systems for years. Your solution was elegant in its simplicity. Richard placed a hand on Jake's shoulder. This is what I'm offering you, Jake. Not charity, not a thank you gift. I'm offering you the chance to save more lives, to develop systems based on your practical knowledge that could help emergency vehicles all over the country. Jake walked slowly around the ambulance, running his hand along its side. The magnitude of the opportunity was just beginning to sink in. I'd need a team, he said finally. People who know more than I do about design and engineering. You'd have the best, Richard assured him. Dr. Wright would be your second in command. I know engines and repairs. I don't know how to run a division or manage people. You'll learn. We all do. Richard smiled. When I started Kingsley Motors, I knew about electrical engineering. I didn't know how to run a company. 20 years later, here we are. Jake took a deep breath. Part of him wanted to run away, back to the simple life he understood. But another part, a part that had always wanted to do more, be more, whispered that this was his chance. Can I think about it? He asked. Richard nodded. Take the weekend. The position is yours if you want it. He handed Jake a business card. My personal number. Call me when you decide. As the driver took Jake home, his mind raced with possibilities. By the time he reached his apartment, he had already made his decision. He picked up his phone. 3 months later, Jake sat in his new office at Kingsley Motors, reviewing design plans for emergency backup systems. The office still felt strange to him. Too big, too nice, with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. A framed photo stood on his desk, Jake with his sister and her 2 children at Sunday dinner, taken the weekend after he accepted Richard's offer. The door opened, and Dr. Eleanor Wright entered. Everyone called her Ellie. With her practical approach and no-nonsense attitude, she had become Jake's right hand in building the Emergency Vehicle Technologies division. The prototype is ready for testing, she announced. Want to come see? Jake stood up immediately. He still preferred the workshop to the office, the smell of metal and electricity to the scent of leather chairs and coffee. They took the elevator down to the testing facility. 20 staff members now worked in the division, engineers, designers, and mechanics. Some came from Kingsley's other departments, while others were new hires. Jake had insisted on bringing in people with real-world emergency services experience. In the center of the facility sat their first major project, a standard ambulance modified with Kingsley Motors technology. It looked normal from the outside, but under the hood was a revolutionary system. Everyone ready? Jake called out. The team gathered around as Jake turned to Ben Willis, a former paramedic who now served as their field advisor. Ben, walk us through a typical scenario. Ben nodded. Ambulance is transporting a critical patient. Engine fails. Traditional outcome, we're stranded, waiting for backup, precious minutes ticking away. Jake walked around the ambulance. Today, we're testing our solution. Ellie, explain the system. Ellie stepped forward. We've installed a secondary electric power system that activates automatically when the main engine fails. It provides 30 minutes of full power, enough to reach a hospital in most urban environments. For rural areas, we've developed a quick repair module that can be activated by any paramedic. No mechanical knowledge required. Jake opened the hood. Let's demonstrate. Ben, kill the engine. Ben turned off the ignition. The ambulance went silent for exactly 3 seconds. Then a soft hum began as the backup system engaged. The lights, sirens, and all medical equipment inside remained fully operational. Response time is within medical safety parameters, Ellie noted, checking the computer readings. Power levels stable. Jake smiled. It was working exactly as designed. Now let's try the quick repair module. He pressed a button inside the cab. A compartment opened beneath the driver's seat containing a small device with a simple interface. One red button labeled Activate. This is for situations where the backup power won't be enough, Jake explained. Press the button and the module diagnoses the most common engine problems and attempts temporary repairs. No tools needed. Ben pressed the button. The device lit up, connected to the ambulance's computer, and began running diagnostics. Within 40 seconds, it had identified the simulated engine problem and implemented a bypass solution. The main engine roared back to life. Applause broke out among the IY team. Jake felt a swell of pride, not just for himself but for everyone who had worked so hard to make this happen. Richard Kingsley entered the testing area, using a cane to support himself. Though he had largely recovered from his heart attack, doctors had insisted he take things slow. "I see I arrived just in time for success," Richard said, smiling. "Well done, everyone." The team beamed under his praise. After a few minutes of questions and congratulations, Richard turned to Jake. "Mind if we talk privately?" They walked to a small conference room adjacent to the testing area. Richard sat down, looking tired but pleased. "3 months ago, you were fixing mufflers at a small garage," Richard said. "Now you're leading a team that might change emergency medicine forever. How does it feel?" Jake considered the question. "Strange. Good strange. But still strange." Richard laughed. "That feeling never entirely goes away, trust me. We still have more testing to do," Jake said. "And the costs are higher than I'd like. Not every county or city can afford this technology. That's our next challenge." Richard leaned forward. "I've been speaking with the board. We want to create a foundation that will provide grants to help emergency services adopt these systems, especially in rural and underserved areas." Jake's eyes widened. "That would be amazing. We'd need someone to run it," Richard continued. "Someone who understands both the technology and why it matters." "Ellie would be perfect," Jake suggested. "She knows the systems inside and out." "I was thinking of Olivia Martinez." Jake looked surprised. "The paramedic from the ambulance?" Richard nodded. "I've gotten to know her these past months. She's been consulting with your team, right? She's smart, passionate, and has frontline experience. Plus, she understands the stakes. She was there that day." Before Jake could respond, his phone buzzed. It was a text message from Ben. "Turn on the news, Channel 6. Jake grabbed the remote for the conference room TV and switched it on. A news reporter stood outside Riverside Auto Repair, Frank's garage. Local business owner Frank Peterson announced today that his shop will be closing after 17 years, the reporter said. Peterson cited increasing costs and competition from larger chains as the reason for the closure. The camera turned to Frank, looking older and more tired than Jake remembered. "It's just getting too hard for small shops like mine to stay afloat," Frank said. "The big chains can offer lower prices and I just can't compete anymore." Jake turned off the TV, feeling a strange mix of emotions. He had no reason to feel sorry for Frank, who had fired him without a second thought. Yet he couldn't help but remember the 5 years he'd spent in that shop, learning and growing as a mechanic. "Life has a way of coming full circle," Richard observed quietly. Jake nodded. Then an idea began to form in his mind, one that seemed perfect in its symmetry. "Richard," he said slowly, "what if the foundation did more than just provide grants for the technology? What if it also created training programs for mechanics and paramedics? We could use smaller garages as training centers, teaching local mechanics how to service and repair emergency vehicles with our systems." Richard raised an eyebrow. "Including Riverside Auto Repair?" "Maybe," Jake admitted. "If Frank was willing to adapt, it would save his business, create jobs, and help us roll out the technology faster." Richard considered this for a moment. "Forgiving the man who fired you? That's generous." Jake shrugged. "It's not about forgiveness, it's about what makes sense. Frank knows engines. His shop is well located, and sometimes people deserve a second chance." Richard stood up, leaning on his cane. "Draw up a proposal for the board. If it makes business sense, we'll do it." As Richard left, Jake remained seated, thinking about how much his life had changed in 3 short months, from fired mechanic to division director proposing company initiatives. It seemed impossible, yet here he was. His phone buzzed again. This time it was Olivia. Heard about the successful test. Drinks to celebrate? Jake smiled and texted back, absolutely, and I might have a job offer for you. 1 year later, Jake stood before a crowd gathered outside the newly renovated Riverside Emergency Vehicle Center, formerly known as Riverside Auto Repair. The familiar building had been expanded, with a modern glass addition housing classrooms and testing equipment. The old garage area remained, though it now contained specialized tools and diagnostic systems. Today marks the opening of our 10th training center, Jake said into the microphone. And this one is special to me, because this is where it all began. In the front row sat Richard Kingsley, looking much healthier than he had a year ago. Beside him were Ellie Wright and Olivia Martinez, now the director of the Kingsley Emergency Response Foundation. In the year since its creation, the foundation had provided grants to over 200 emergency service departments across the country, helping them adopt the life-saving technology Jake's team had developed. Our mission is simple, Jake continued, to make sure no ambulance, fire truck, or emergency vehicle ever leaves someone stranded when minutes matter. To date, our backup systems have been activated in real emergencies 37 times. That's 37 situations where lives might have been lost without this technology. He gestured to the building behind him. These training centers are the next step. By teaching local mechanics how to install and service our systems, we create jobs in communities while ensuring the technology is properly maintained. As Jake finished his speech and the ribbon was cut, people began touring the facility. Jake found himself face to face with Frank Peterson, now the manager of the training center. The past year had been difficult for Frank. The closing of his business, the period of unemployment, and finally the unexpected offer from the Kingsley Foundation. Nice speech, Frank said, extending his hand. Jake shook it firmly. Thanks. How's the new position treating you? Different than running my own shop, Frank admitted, but good different. Teaching these young mechanics, seeing them get excited about the technology. It reminds me why I got into this business in the first place. Jake nodded. He understood completely. Despite his title and office, he still spent as much time as possible in the workshop, getting his hands dirty and solving practical problems. Olivia approached them, clipboard in hand. Sorry to interrupt, but the reporters want some photos of the team, and then we need to prep for the demonstration. Frank excused himself to organize the mechanics for the photos. Jake smiled at Olivia. Their friendship had grown over the past year as they worked closely on the foundation projects. Some people at Kingsley Motors whispered about romance, but the truth was simpler. They shared a passion for the work and mutual respect. How are the numbers looking? Jake asked as they walked toward the demonstration area. Better than projected, Olivia replied. The cost per unit is down 30% since we started mass production. Municipal budgets can handle that, especially with our grant program. The demonstration area had been set up to simulate a roadside emergency. An ambulance was positioned with its hood up, a dummy patient visible inside. Local emergency responders, mechanics in training, and reporters gathered around. Today we'll demonstrate how our quick response system works in a real-world scenario, Olivia announced to the crowd. This ambulance has experienced a catastrophic engine failure while transporting a critical patient. One of the newly trained mechanics stepped forward. First, I'll activate the backup power system by pressing this button. He reached inside the ambulance cab and pressed a glowing blue button on the dashboard. The lights on the ambulance came on, and the medical equipment inside powered up. The patient is now stable with all medical systems operational, the mechanic explained. The backup system gives us 30 minutes of full power. Next, he moved to a compartment on the side of the ambulance and removed a small device. This is our rapid repair module. It can diagnose common engine problems and implement temporary fixes. The mechanic attached the device to a port under the hood. Within seconds, lights on the device began flashing as it diagnosed the problem. A minute later, the engine started. The temporary repair is complete, the mechanic announced proudly. This ambulance can now continue to the hospital. Applause broke out among the observers. Jake felt that now familiar pride, not just in the technology, but in the people who made it work. The mechanics learning new skills, the emergency responders embracing innovation, the team at Kingsley who had turned his rough ideas into refined systems. After the demonstration, as the crowd mingled and enjoyed refreshments, Richard Kingsley pulled Jake aside. "Well done," Richard said. "From concept to nationwide implementation in under 18 months. Impressive by any standard." Jake shrugged modestly. "We had good motivation." Richard laughed. "Indeed we did." He grew more serious. "The board is extremely pleased. They've approved our international expansion plans. Europe first, then Asia." "That's great news," Jake said, already thinking about the adaptations they'd need to make for different countries, different emergency response systems. "There's more," Richard continued. "I'm stepping back from day-to-day operations. My doctors insist, and for once I'm listening to them. We need a new chief operating officer, someone who understands both the technology and the mission." Jake looked at Richard in surprise. "You're offering me the COO position?" "You've earned it," Richard said simply. "You took a chance that day when you fixed that ambulance. I took a chance on you as a division director. Both gambles paid off better than either of us could have imagined." Before Jake could respond, they were interrupted by a commotion at the entrance. An ambulance had arrived, not for the demonstration, but a real emergency. A car accident had occurred just down the street, and this was the closest medical facility. Without hesitation, Jake, Olivia, and several trained mechanics rushed to help. The paramedics were bringing in a woman with a deep cut on her arm. The bleeding was under control, but she needed stitches. "Memorial Hospital is 20 minutes away," one paramedic explained. "We thought we could stabilize her here first." Jake directed them to the fully equipped medical room they had installed for training purposes. As the paramedics worked, the woman looked up at Jake. "You're the man from the news," she said. "The mechanic who fixed the ambulance and saved that car guy?" Jake smiled. "That was a while ago." "Well, thank you," she said. "For that, and for this place. My husband works here now. Used to be unemployed before this center opened." As the woman was treated and then transported to the hospital, Jake thought about how a single decision, to help when help was needed, had created ripples that continued to spread outward, touching more lives than he could have imagined. Later, as the day's events wound down, Jake found himself alone in the old garage area. He ran his hand along a workbench that had been there since his days as Frank's employee. His phone buzzed with a message from Richard. "About that COO position. Think about it, no rush." Jake looked around at what his life had become, at the distance he had traveled from that evening 1 year ago when he had chosen to help instead of walk away. He typed his reply. "No need to think about it. I'm in."